Number three is called an ideological ritual. Ideological rituals are about social control, and as a general rule, they are for the sake of the entire religious community, not just for an individual. Ideological rituals seek to change the mood or the behavior, the sentiments, the motivation, and values of a people. Now, I've got one here that's fairly easy, an example and that example is of preaching. And what's really nice about preaching is that Christians aren't the only ones who have preaching. It's called different things in different religions, but we all know what's meant by preaching. The preacher is there to say, God says this in whatever sacred text or form he or she might, and this is what it means for us and how we need to change or refine what we're doing to be more in tune with what God wants. It's a very simple idea. Number four, salvation rituals. Sounds simple, doesn't it? And honestly, it is. Salvation rituals seek to change a person's spiritual identity, and they want to change it from spiritually, you might call it spiritually corrupt or polluted or sinful or unclean or being lost. Salvation rituals attempt to change this to a state of purity, of cleanliness, of being saved, as it were, just as it says in the name, salvation. Obviously, baptism is about the easiest example in our, at least in this area of the world. But I will tell you that many other religions use some form of baptism or the idea of cleansing or purifying oneself with water to symbolize attaining a ritually pure state. So that one's not too hard either, something I think that we're all fairly familiar with. The fifth type of ritual is the revitalization ritual. Revitalization rituals are for an entire community or culture. And it's when that community or religious culture is seen as being in trouble. It might be seen as dying or in the process of being lost. And the idea of the revitalization ritual is to bring it back, to restore the religion, or at least get it started on the right path again. One very easy idea is with the word that almost sounds like revitalization. It's revival. It's that idea that we're becoming complacent. We've forgotten why we're here in the first place, and we need to get our motivation and our congregation back to where it should be and to becoming the community that we should be. So that's easy. If you think about this, I think all of you will be very able to come up with your own personal examples of these 5 types of rituals. You know, some rituals also will fall into more than one category. There's a whole lot of overlap with rituals, just like there is in categories of myth. So don't be stuck that it has to go in just one or just the other. If you're ever asked what category a ritual falls into, the first thing you do is look at the obvious, and then you continue on and you pick out rituals, or you pick out rather other categories that it might also fall into. So, we've talked about the types of ritual, but why don't we move on? Let's talk about the functions of ritual. This is just very similar to when we were talking about the functions of myth. Some of them actually are exactly the same, so it won't take us nearly as long to talk about the functions of ritual. So, social functions, remember when we talked about those with myth? integrate people into a group, reinforce the current social order, overturn the current social order, and the expressive function, right? You get to act out some of your deepest hopes and fears in a ritual. The community comes together in this. And in some ways, Gary Kessler believes that rituals, even more than myths, function in this expressive manner. And what happens is when we act it out, it is more likely to produce a sense of the sacred. Now, this is explained very well by him on page 71 if you want to look at that. As far as the social functions of myth, I'm not going to go over them again. They're exactly the same as the ones for myth. The ones for ritual are the same as the ones for myth when it comes to social functions. And you can go back and look at the last video or just read your book for those. Something I really want to bring up, though, is called myth and ritual theory. Now, I'm not saying myth theory and ritual theory. It's myth and ritual theory, okay? This is a theory that states that, its main statement anyway, is that myth and ritual must go together. They're connected. And the myth, is the thing that's said, and the ritual is the thing that's done or the thing that is acted. The main claim of myth and ritual theory is that you can't have one without the other. That all myth has a ritual and all ritual has a myth that goes with it. And you must understand them together, kind of like a play and a script. If you think about that, it makes a lot of sense. If we look at the myth as the script, the lines in a play, and the play is the acting out on stage, I can see why people would think that they must go together. And in fact, for most rituals, you will have particular things that are said during the ritual that help explain the ritual as it goes. So in some ways, it is like a play and its script. Kessler talks a lot about learning styles and things like that, and he's, well, actually I talk about learning styles, but he brings up a good point, is that it's much easier to understand the thing said and the thing done when you put them together and don't depend upon them separately to learn. There's a problem, though, with myth and ritual theory, as good as it sounds. And the problem is this: if the main claim of myth and ritual theory is that every myth has a corresponding ritual and every ritual has a corresponding myth, we're kind of out of luck, because there are many myths that do not have a corresponding ritual. And there are many rituals that do not have a corresponding myth. For instance, let me just pick a myth from Judaism. Noah's Ark. I've been in church all my life. I've seen Jewish people in synagogue. I have no idea if there is a ritual anywhere for Noah's Ark. The myth, the story, seems to stand alone. And as far as ritual without a myth, well, the one that I started this video with, remember when I said that your preacher might say, God is good all the time, and the congregation would say, and all the time God is good? There's no story for that. We don't know where it came from. We don't know how it started. There just isn't a story. So this is one of the main issues, the main criticism to the myth and ritual theory as a whole. Now, proponents of the theory answer this by saying, well, many myths and many rituals have been separated and lost over time, but in the beginning, there was one for each of the other. Maybe so. The problem is that we don't have any way to prove that. We just don't know. Now, when it comes to rituals, the most historically prevalent ritual is that of sacrifice. And I say historically prevalent because many religions started out practicing sacrifice but don't do so any longer. Religions tend to evolve like any other human endeavor evolves. It starts out one way and refines itself and changes itself as time goes on. But sacrifice is an extraordinarily important ritual within the history of religion. Some scholars have even argued that an understanding of sacrifice will lead to an understanding of religion. Here's a Latin word you want to know: sacrificare. Sacrificare. And to you Latin scholars, if I have mispronounced that, please forgive me. That's my best take on it. But sacrificare basically means to make sacred. And in some manner, this is what religion is all about: making the profane sacred. Hard to do, isn't it? So what does that mean? The word obvious, sacrifice, obviously comes from the word sacrificare. But what's the point? Well, there are 5 explanations of sacrifice in your book, but think about this first. Sacrifice is the act of giving a gift to the sacred. And the idea is that when one gives a gift to the sacred, if the sacred accepts it, then some of that sacredness is transferred to the gift itself, and from the gift itself to the giver. It's almost like a contagion of sacredness that travels from the sacred power all the way to us, the profane givers. That's kind of your base layer understanding of sacrifice. But let's talk about some of these explanations of sacrifice, okay? The first one is exchanges and thanksgiving. Do ut des in the Latin. That means give to get, basically. And this was the idea of it. Now, in exchanges and thanksgiving, exchanges refers to, dear sacred power, I need you to protect my vegetable garden this year. I'm not getting enough rain for it, so I will give you my best cow if you'll send rain for the garden. That would be exchanges. But in thanksgivings, what you're saying is, dear sacred power, thank you for taking care of my vegetable garden this year. You did a great job and I really appreciate it. Here's my best cow. The action is the same, but the intent is just a little bit different. Exchanges is kind of bargaining, and thanksgivings is simply expressing your gratitude, although you're doing the same type of action in both of those. The next one is called substitution. What's the best thing you can give? What is your most precious possession? And everybody has the exact same one. Well, it's your life. However, sacrificing ourselves on an altar is kind of, senseless, really. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So what do? We give our next best thing. Maybe it is our best goat or our best cow or the first 10% of whatever money we make in a year. Or maybe it's our life in a different manner. Not that we unalive ourselves, but that we devote our life in service to the sacred. uh, monks and nuns, and in certain cases, priests, and all manner of different religious vocations see what they're doing as a sacrifice. And in some ways it is. They're giving up the regular life in order to serve their understanding of the sacred. Their sacrifice is a substitute for actually sacrificing their very physical life. This idea of substitutions is where you see Kessler describes the idea of the scapegoat coming into play. And that's something I'm going to let you read for yourself. But this is the category in which it falls, this idea of substitutions. The third explanation of sacrifice is that sacrifice is a way to channel and disguise violence. René Girard offered up the idea that in every community, in every congregation, in every society, there are conflicts, there are disagreements, and that sacrifice transfers the blame onto the sacrificial victim, whether it's a goat or something else, and in that way kind of drains off the penchant for violence that builds up in any community at any one time. Think about it. We've all had those times when we are so angry with our community that we could gladly sock them in the nose. What Renee is saying is that by sacrificing an actual animal and by letting blood flow, it kind of drains off our need to hurt each other. As a secular example of that, you could look at Hitler's Germany. When he came into power, Hitler was very good at dehumanizing people groups and blaming people groups. In fact, he blamed all the Jewish people basically for just about everything, but specifically for causing the Great Depression that was taking over the world at that time. It was understood that if you got rid of the Jewish people, then everything would be okay. And unfortunately, many people joined in that idea. Now we know now that that was just horrific, not true, and, evil, if you will. But the idea here is that you're looking for a scapegoat. You're trying to place the blame on somebody else. You say, this or these people did it. It's their fault. We'll sacrifice them. They're out of our hair, and we can go ahead and keep being the good ones. That's one way to look at it. Read that in your book. It's pretty interesting. I don't remember if he actually uses the Hitler analogy, but it is an apt analogy. Think about it from that point of view and see what you think. Number 4, as far as the 5 explanations of sacrifice, is that sacrifice is a reenactment of a primal event. A primal event is an original event, the first time something happens. A good example in your book is if you look in chapter 4, if you go back to chapter 4 and look at the case study of Purusha, the primal man that the Hindu gods sacrificed and used his body parts to make all the other parts of the world, right? This idea is that every time Hindu people would have a sacrifice, then in some way it is reenacting the first sacrifice that the gods made with Purusha. There's an idea there. From the Christian point of view, if you wanted to look at reenactments of primal events, you could look at, once again, communion. If you think about it coming from the Last Supper that Jesus had with the disciple that was then followed by his sacrifice on the cross. then when we have communion within the church that's done in remembrance of Jesus according to his words, then we are in fact uh, reenacting that primal event of the last sacrifice, because Christians believe that Jesus being crucified on the cross was the last sacrifice needed and didn't sacrifice any more after that. So there's an idea. Read up and look on it. And then the fifth one. This explanation is really interesting. Sacrifice is about communication between humans and superhumans, or you could say profane and sacred if you wanted to. But sacrifice is a way to communicate more easily with God. And I see the point here. If you ever in your whole life want to talk to somebody and it's a hard conversation, you can do a couple of things. You try to make the conversation easier, and maybe you take a little gift. Maybe it's just, some candy they like, or, just a small bouquet of flowers, or something like that. Anything to make people relax, to help people hear you more clearly, right? This idea about sacrifice being about communication between humans and non-humans can be seen in the Old Testament several times, but the one that really stands out to me is in 1 Samuel. In 1 Samuel, there is a woman named Hannah, and she is married to a man named Elkanah. Elkanah also has a second wife, but he loves Hannah the most. However, his second wife, whose name I can't remember offhand, is very fertile, and she has baby after baby after baby throughout the years, and poor Hannah just doesn't get pregnant, and it makes her so sad she can't stand it. All she really wants is a baby. Elkanah reassures her all the time, I love you more than anything. I don't even need a baby. I just love you. But you know how things are. Every year, Elkanah takes his family to Shiloh. There's the tabernacle is there. This was written before the temple was built, and so every year they go up and offer their yearly sacrifice as a family, and of course they stay there a few days and they have a big sacrificial meal, and it's it's a pleasant time. It's a nice time. It's a worshipful time as well. So one year they go. Hannah's very, very upset. And she goes away from the sacrificial meal and she goes into the tabernacle right there in front of the Ark of the Covenant. And she starts praying. And she's praying for a baby. That's all she's asking for is a baby. And she's praying hard and she's so unhappy that she starts crying while she's praying. Now, Jewish people at this point prayed out loud. They would close their eyes and hold their hands out. I don't think you can hear me. They'd hold their hands out like this instead of folding them. They'd hold their hands out as if they're waiting for a blessing to be placed in their hands. But you know how it is when you're really upset and crying. You can cry so hard nobody can't understand a word that you're saying. So she's like, thank you for everything. I just really want a baby. Please, God, I want a baby. You can understand how she felt. Well, about that time, the priest comes in and says, he thought she was drunk. He thought she was just out of her mind drunk. He had a good reason to think that. Usually, although wine was served with most meals back then, it was maybe half water, half wine, or maybe even just a few drops of wine. Wine was precious, and it was used, among other things, to help purify water. It was a dry country and hard to find good fresh water. So the alcohol in the wine was used to purify the water so you wouldn't get sick drinking it. But when you went to Shiloh for the yearly sacrifice, that's when you got to drink real wine. And that's the only time most people ever saw enough wine to actually get drunk on. So that's kind of why he thought that. There she is, all nutsy and prayy, and you know how it is. So he says that, and she says, no, no. And she explains, I'm not drunk. I'm just so upset and so bitterly sad. All I want is a baby. I just want to bear a child for my husband. I love him so much, and I want a baby to love. That's all I want. And I'm willing to bring him back and leave him here with you after after I get him weaned, if I could just have a baby. The priest felt so bad for her. He said, this time next year, you'll have a baby. So she went home. They left the sacrifice, and sure enough, she got pregnant. Well, that's pretty neat. And in fact, the baby whom she ended up having was Samuel, the great prophet, the first prophet, as he's usually seen. Now, why did I tell you this story? Because sacrifice is about communication between humans and the sacred. Sacrifice is a gift to the sacred that opens up the lines of communications. And it is at the time of sacrifice that this same prayer that Hannah's been saying for years now actually comes to fruition, and she's given the baby. And so that idea that sacrifice facilitates communication between humans and the sacred is very, very important. So which of these 5 explanations of sacrifice is the most correct? Nah, can't do it. No way. You see, sacrifice isn't a unidimensional event. All of these ideas work on one level or another. But that's religion, isn't it? We never have just one right answer. No, don't tell me about the exam and all that. On those, you have one right answer. At any rate, that's the lecture for Chapter 5. I hope everybody has a great weekend. And, don't forget that your discussion board is due on the 16th, I believe, which is it's on Monday night at 11:59. You have to have it in. Don't forget, with your discussion board this time, you will post, but you also have to offer one response for it. So enjoy it. If you have any questions, please let me know. And until then, be careful with your sacrifice. Who knows what will happen with it. Talk to you later now. Bye-bye.